Good morning, Nick here again, and welcome back to the garden. Today I'm going to change my focus a little bit from all the perennial plants we've been discussing to some annual plants. Food forests obviously are mostly perennial plants, and there are plenty of YouTube channels out there about growing annual plants like these cabbage plants right here. But I'm doing this today because it's a special situation with a little interesting twist. So the scientific name for cabbage is Brassica oleracea, and I'm sure many of you know that cabbage, broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and several others, they're all Brassica oleracea. They've just been bred to, take different shapes, but it's all the same plant. And if you let all of them flower and go to seed, if they cross-pollinate with each other, they'll go back to producing something like the original plant that all of these came from, Brassica oleracea, which is a plant originally native to the coast of Europe. Okay, so what does that have to do with everything here? Well, a year ago, I was walking my dog along the coast of Oregon, and I came across some wild brassica growing right along the shore, right along the coast at the base of the cliffs along the Oregon coast. And I would walk my dog every day, and I'd grab a few leaves of that and just munch. I was just foraging as I went along the coast. And before we left there and came back to Florida, it had bolted, had gone to seed. So I went ahead and collected some seeds, and that's what we have here. I've held on to those seeds for about a year, and when it got cool enough here in Florida, I put them in these raised beds. And I would grow annual plants in my food forest soil, but it's not ready yet for annual plants. Annuals need a richer, more bacteria-dominated, higher pH soil than forest soil, which is more fungally dominated and a lower pH. And I just haven't had enough time yet in the food forest to develop a lot of soil rich enough. But I put some in these raised beds, and I overseeded these beds quite a bit because I had no idea after a year of hanging on to those seeds that I collected how they would do. Well, they obviously germinated very well. Let's take a close-up look. These plants resemble a kale to a collard. They don't have the shapes of the broccoli or the cabbage or the Brussels sprouts. They're just leafy. Some of them, and by the way, there were just thousands and thousands, a very large population of this stuff growing wild on the Oregon coast. Some of them have this sort of red Russian kale shape, like the one in the middle of the frame there. And most of them had more of a collard shape, like most of the rest of these. And so every one of these has a mix of those two shapes. They seem to be coexisting and cross-pollinating each other. Look like they've been growing there for many years. And they were able to self-seed in that location because right along that Oregon coast, all summer long, the temperature rarely exceeds about 60, 62 degrees. You only have to go about 5 miles inland, sometimes even only a mile inland, for it to get much warmer than that on the Oregon coast during the summertime. But right on the coast, it's an amazing little microclimate that stays cold and it stays moist. And so it's very similar environment to the coastal Europe where these plants originated from. And just like their homeland of coastal Europe, they were able to self-seed and perpetuate and live year-round in that location. And now I'm not going to be able to do that with these plants in Florida, obviously. In fact, I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping that it doesn't get so warm so quickly in the spring that these plants bolt on me and go to seed. Hopefully I'll get some good food out of this before that happens. So my plan is to collect the seeds again when they do bolt, and save them until this time next year. Yeah, it's nice here in Florida to be able to grow things year round. We can do these cole crops starting in November really well, and it's nice to have options. I did some videos about the freeze damage. The tropical plants got hit pretty good by the freeze, as you can see, and if anything, that cold weather just stimulated these brassicas, and they're just growing even better. So I'll be thinning these. As I thin these out, I'll be taking them as baby greens and eating them that way. That way I can thin them out and end up with you know, maybe a dozen big plants per pot. And we'll see how it goes. I don't know how, you know, collards are very tolerant of warm weather. Kale, not so much. So we'll have to see if these tend to be more like collards or more like kale, or what could happen is that we've got enough genetic diversity here that some of them will be more warm tolerant, and those will be the ones that don't bolt as much as the others. So I may end up basically breeding a collard from these wild brassica seeds that's suitable for my location here in Florida. So I guess that's it. I just thought that was interesting and wanted to share it with you. We'll let it go with that, and there's a couple of videos I've got coming up, so stay tuned to the channel. The next couple of videos I plan to talk about the wood wide web and go into more depth about the mycorrhizal fungi that make up the wood wide web. And then based on that, the next video then I'll be discussing how we do the transition from a bacteria dominated higher pH soil to a fungally dominated lower pH soil appropriate for trees and shrubs. So that's the next couple of videos. So until then, everybody, happy gardening.